Early voting turnout for the November 2nd election is the lowest our county has seen in over a decade. If you're considering staying away from the polls because you don't feel well informed about the many propositions on the ballot, well, it's time for some straight talk. I'm Bunker Bob Steinhagen, and this is The Bunker Bob Show. Welcome back, my friends, as Election Day is fast upon us. And despite the fact that COVID restrictions have lifted, way too many voters, especially conservatives, will sit this one out, which makes the impact of the few of us that actually go to vote significantly greater. Many viewers have requested me to weigh in on this election, which has no candidates running for any office, just opportunities for Texans to amend our state constitution and for taxpayers to agree or disagree to taking on more debt in the form of bonds for local and statewide projects. Now, it's one thing not to vote at all, but worse of all is for those who go to the polls without knowing what's on the ballot before they get there. That's why I'm going to explain each proposition, tell you how I'm going to vote and why. So now, since my audience is growing outside of Rockwall County, I'll first tackle the propositions that every Texan gets to consider. Now, since being adopted in 1876, the Texas Constitution has been amended 507 times. It seems Texans do more amending than most states. And this is because our state's constitution requires voter approval, where elsewhere it is left up to politicians. Now, Proposition 1 is an expansion of the state picking winners and losers in the charitable gaming space that is not the free market at work. This is not some libertarian happy space for individual choice. This is the PR side of corporate welfare recipients getting to pretend they are giving back to the community. I'll be voting no, and I hope that you do too. Proposition 2 contains misleading ballot wording to hide the fact that it uses local property tax increases to pay for transportation projects that should be funded by the state using your existing taxes to give counties the ability to issue new road debt through bonds using an unpopular finance method backed by property tax increases called transportation reinvestment zones. Now, Texas Uniting for Reform and Freedom has put a spotlight on this proposition, highlighting that the state representative Terry Canales, who is a Democrat from Edinburgh, is the author of this bill, which voters rejected in 2011. So how is this back on the ballot? Well, it's easy. They simply removed the phrase ad valorem tax increases and included the word transportation, which wasn't included in the original bill, but was added since ballot initiatives for transportation tends to pass with more than 80% of the vote. Despite Senator Bob Hall's efforts, this proposition has been rebranded. Worst part is that it will virtually guarantee your property taxes won't go down. In fact, Proposition 2 would authorize counties to divert up to 65% of your property tax increases to projects the state would fund with your existing road taxes. At the risk of coming off as patronizing toward my regular audience, voters need to remember that bonds are like credit card debt of the government. It's not the $50 charged to the card that creates problems, but the interest that rapidly accrues when that money isn't immediately paid off. Because they are designed not to be paid back quickly, they are designed to collect interest. That means taxpayers are on the hook for whatever amount is listed plus another 50% or so. So I almost always vote no on local bonds unless the need is explicit and the spending plan is extremely detailed. I vote no a lot. Proposition 2 is a lot of spending, a lot of debt, and not a lot of clarity. I'll vote no along with every other conservative who's weighed in on this terrible proposition. Now, Proposition 3 is a reminder of how ineffectual, even cowardly, our courts and legislature have become. In 2019, Governor Greg Abbott closed down churches, setting the stage for local governments to follow suit. He backed down, but the local tyrants didn't ease up, and through it all, the courts ignored the existing constitutional protection for worship. So we get another constitutional amendment reaffirming the existing amendment that Greg Abbott and the courts already ignored. I'm not only voting yes, I'm voting hell yes. Now, Proposition 4 limits voters' ability to pick the candidate of their choice for local judicial races. I'm not sure how citizens are served by requiring lawyers to spend an additional amount of professional time chasing ambulances and billing clients before being eligible to be elected as a judge. I'll vote no, and I hope you do too. Now, Proposition 5 is being sold as fairness, putting local candidates under the thumb of the unelected bureaucracy that regulates incumbent judges. The difference? The unelected bureaucracy serves at the leisure of the elected judges. Gee, I wonder how that will turn out. It's an incumbency protection racket, and I'm voting no. I look at Proposition 6 the same way I do at Proposition 3. I'll be angry when voting for it. Greg Abbott decided to block nursing home residents from their families, leaving many to suffer and die alone. Our courts looked on and did nothing. The amendment is the least the legislature could do, and it is weak, but maybe the next governor won't ignore it. Now, by design, Propositions 7 and 8 are really hard to be against. They tug at the emotional heartstring by extending homestead tax limits and exemptions to the surviving spouses of people who qualified for the original exemption. Lawmakers exempt sympathetic people from the confiscatory property tax system precisely so they can avoid doing anything substantive for everyone. Legislators know the widow of a disabled veteran would be a powerful victim for the fight for real property tax reform if her home was taken due to the property tax burden, so they do things to keep her and others like her off the rhetorical battlefield. I'm voting yes because I will always support limiting the government's ability to tax people. In fact, my very first act as an elected member of the McLennan-Chisholm City Council was to introduce and pass a senior tax cap for our citizens, which had been tossed around by former mayors and councils for over a decade before I got there. So that's the part of the ballot that every Texan will be considering on Tuesday. Earlier in the show, I said that I almost always vote no on local bonds unless the need is explicit and the spending plan is extremely detailed. Well, Rockwall County Proposition A neither explains the explicit need nor provides any real detail about why this bond is necessary, especially since these road improvements are on state-funded roads where tax dollars are supposed to be used. The argument being made is that the state will prioritize needs where local funding is included. So instead of waiting 8 or 10 years for the state to finally get around to improve the roads, they'll do it in 4 or 5. However, I think that the mayor of Heath, who came before the county commissioner's court last week, makes the most compelling argument for why I am voting no. Here is what he had to say.
Thank Judge and Commissioners for allowing me to speak today. The road bond, Proposition A, has been poorly managed by this court. Proposition was put on the ballot before citizens were informed of what it would entail. The list of projects was delivered only 2 weeks before early voting. The current campaign is financed by the engineering firms who will be the recipients of the bond money. The current campaign is misleading and borders on untrue. The claim $1 billion in roads is mostly Interstate 30. Citizens' taxes have gone up through appreciation. You simply did not lower the rate to compensate. Having met directly with TxDOT, I know that many of the listed projects would never happen. Your consultant, John Polster, presented at the Heath Council. At the end, each council member declared they could not support the road bond. Mr. Polster described it as a $150 million credit card for him to go find road deals with TxDOT and COG. One of our citizens then spoke and said she'd never seen a council disrespected in such a way. One of you should have been there. The project list has deteriorated into crayons on a map in different areas in an effort to appease cities to push this bond through. No traffic studies have been presented, no solutions provided for current congestion. You've taken a fragmented approach to a holistic problem. You have lost sight of the original purpose in hopes of securing money to continue business as usual. Whether this bond passes or not, the county needs to take a fresh look at the process. The process is broken. You've outsourced your job to a consultant. The problem is, none of us voted for him. We need representation from our paid elected commissioners. I encourage the citizens of Rockwall County to vote no on Prop A. It doesn't mean you won't get roads. It means you demand the county go back to the drawing board and get this right.
Now, here is an extraordinary mayor who cares greatly about fiscal responsibility. Needless to say, I agree with Mayor Elam and will be voting against this proposition. I think Rockwall County taxpayers deserve a more clear understanding of what is being proposed and why it is necessary. For most Rockwall County taxpayers, this election, however, is primarily about the $475 million bond proposal. 2 weeks ago, together, I had Joe Wimpy, co-chair of the School Bond Committee, and school board member Amy Hilton on my show, and they presented several compelling reasons to vote yes for Rockwall Independent School District's proposition. Now, I've heard from many who are opposed to the bond and have invited several to come on my show to bring empirical evidence as to why these bonds are being misrepresented or unnecessary, but no one took me up on the offer. Initially, I was opposed, as I am to most bond proposals, because I trusted that the information I received from opponents, people that I trusted, was factually based. However, when I investigated the information for myself, I was disappointed by how much of the information was inaccurate. For instance, the Rockwall Independent School District does not have the top 10 highest tax rates in Texas. There are actually more than 330 school districts out of a total of 1,029 with higher tax rates than ours. The previous bonds approved by voters, including the one in 2015, still have many years left to pay them off. So the argument that these bonds are being presented now because the others are going away to keep the tax rate flat is simply baseless. And if this bond election fails, none of our tax rates will go down because of it. Now, even though the tax rate will increase less than a penny, I think it's incredibly dishonest to say that it won't have an impact on homeowners, because it will. If your CAD assessed value goes up, even if the tax rate goes down, as you see here, your property taxes owed will still go up, especially for homeowners whose values continue to increase, even when the tax rate decreases, as it has over the last few years. The Rockwall County Appraisal District assessment still results in a higher tax bill, and that is an important point. Now, the ultimate paradox is that communities with better schools are more desirable places to live, which results in the inevitable increase in property value. The question that taxpayers should be asking is whether or not the proposed projects included in the bond are worthwhile and will truly result in a positive return on investment that the school districts have been marketing. I can say that I think the school district has done a very good job of being specific in how it plans to spend the money. But it may be more important to consider how the school district has been performing and how well it has been meeting the needs of our community. The fact that RISD has made incredible strides to provide opportunities for students to engage in vocational learning where they can learn a trade like welding or the culinary arts, as they have opened opportunities for students to get dual credit and advanced placement courses or pursue a law track, for instance, demonstrates to this taxpayer that the students who attend Rockwall schools are given significant opportunities to succeed over and above what most other school districts offer. My biggest criticism about the RISD school bond is that I do not believe that they are being realistic in the projected growth rates of our community, which I expressed to the bond co-chair Joe Wimpy and school board member Amy Hilton. And I think that the need for more money will come sooner than they think. This is primarily because our county commissioners and many of the cities in Rockwall County are encouraging developers of high-density developments rather than standing up to them to protect our county from unrestrained growth. Make no mistake, developers own Rockwall County, and the only way to stop them is to elect county commissioners, a county judge, city council members, and mayors who will help protect us and our community, not offer it up to the highest bidder. Now, the image behind me is from a presentation given by the developers of the Trilogy Development Group, who just last week got their development agreement with the city of McClendon-Chisholm approved to build 2,188 homes on 889 acres through a special MUD district, which was approved less than a month ago. And ironically, the mayor and every member of McClendon-Chisholm's City Council campaigned to protect the open spaces and large lot sizes. Ask yourself why the City Council met with the developer behind closed doors in executive session for more than an hour and a half and spent absolutely no time in open session discussing or deliberating the merits of the MUD district that they approved last month, or the development agreement that is guaranteed to screw the citizens of McClendon-Chisholm and put a huge burden on Rockwall schools, which was not factored into RISD's projections because up until a month ago, McClendon-Chisholm had a minimum 1.5 acre per home site ordinance that they completely ignored. That's how Sonoma Verde was pushed through. And earlier in the year, Mayor Keith Short and council members Lorna Kippett and Trudy Wessner alone approved another development which violated the ordinance as well. Now the ordinance is just 1 acre per home site, but as this development proves, they are bound by no ordinance or law. It's also too bad that Rockwall County doesn't have a district attorney that cares about holding public officials accountable for violating state laws, especially those governing open meetings. The last time the DA requested an investigation into a public official's possible violation of the Texas Open Meetings Act was when I was mayor. They ordered an investigation into what has proven to be baseless accusations by people who, not surprisingly, are in bed with developers that want to bring high-density neighborhoods into Rockwall County. Thank goodness voters got rid of that mean-spirited Mayor Steinhagen, who was hated and despised by developers in Rockwall County's good old boy network that is selling our county down the river to the highest bidder. Oh, and all behind closed doors. My child attends private school, which means I'm paying twice for her education. Even still, I recognize that Rockwall Independent School District is one of the best bangs for the buck when it comes to public education, and is why I am voting yes for both school bond propositions. So, there you have it, Rockwall County. If you've taken time to watch this show, then take time to go and vote. Remember Thomas Jefferson's quote that when the people fear the government, there is tyranny. When the government fears the people, there is liberty. I'll see you at the polls. Blessings.